There are stories buried in the cracks of history, not in the grand proclamations of kings, nor in the thunder of armies, but in the silence between breaths, in the shadow of a mask, in the step of a warrior no one taught you about, in the laughter of a man no one ever truly saw. Tonight we journey beyond the headlines of empires and the names carved in stone. We step into the lives of those who defied expectations, who fought not just with swords or words, but with will, against silence, against time, against a world that tried to erase them. We all walk with the medieval court jester, the man who made empires laugh while carrying sorrow in his bones. We'll stand beside warrior queens who wore armor, not as costume, but as destiny. We'll trace the sacred origins of martial arts, where every strike was a prayer, every stance a story. And we'll uncover the birth of theater, not on polished stages, but in firelight, wine, and ritual. This is not just history, it's memory, it's resistance. It's the echo of those who were never meant to be remembered, but who changed everything anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments, where are you tuning in from and what time is it for you? It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world, from midnight cities to morning light, all gathered here listening to the same forgotten voices. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let the outside world fade, because tonight we begin. Music swells gently, then fades into silence. The first story begins. He entered the world not with a cry, but with a laugh someone else's. A nobleman's. Perhaps at a feast where the boy slipped on spilled wine and muttered a clumsy excuse that sounded like a punchline. That one, the Lord said, pointing. He's funny. And just like that, his life was no longer his own. No one became a jester by choice. You didn't apprentice for it. You were chosen, plucked from obscurity for your limp, your sharp tongue, your strange voice, or the way your face twisted when you smiled. It might have been clever, or odd, or small. And in a world that feared difference, you were made to wear it like a crown of bells. They gave him a hat lopsided, horned, jingling with every step, a patchwork tunic stitched from clashing colors, like a clown's prison uniform. Shoes curled at the toes, perfect for tripping. He wore humiliation like silk, because that's what it was. A costume designed to remind everyone, especially himself, that he was not a man, but a spectacle. Lived in the castle, but not as a guest. He slept near the kitchens, in a room too small for a broom, close enough to hear the laughter from the great hall, but never to join it. He ate scraps, stood during feasts, and was expected to dance when the wine flowed. He was always on, even in silence. If he frowned, they asked why he wasn't funny. If he wept, they laughed. His sadness was a failure of duty. His job wasn't to entertain, it was to absorb. He soaked up the tension, the boredom, the rage of kings, and spat it back as a joke. When the queen scowled, they summoned the fool. When the king had a nightmare, the jester was dragged from bed to juggle turnips. His worth was measured in chuckles, his survival in timing. One misstep, a joke too sharp, a mimicry too accurate, and he might wake up in the stocks, or worse. And yet, in that grotesque hat, he held a power no knight or bishop dared claim. Truth. Only the fool could speak plainly. He could mock the corrupt priest, imitate the vain baron, whisper satire beneath a song, and, if he danced well enough, he might even be heard. But truth in the court was a blade with no handle. It's too much and it cut him. Too little and he was just another jester, forgotten. He knew secrets, affairs, betrayals, plots, whispered over goblets. The nobles spoke freely around him, forgetting that a fool has ears. But he learned to bury truth under a pratfall, to dress wisdom in absurdity. Because in a world of swords and silence, the only safe voice was the one they thought was joking. Years passed. His hair grayed beneath the coxcomb. His joints ached from endless bows and tumbles. He forgot his real name. He forgot the feel of quiet mornings, of grief unperformed, of love unmocked. He had no family, no legacy, no grave with a stone. When he died, likely in that same broom closet, the cooks might have noticed the silence. Remember that fool who danced like a goat, one might say, and someone new would arrive, bells on his hat, grin painted on his face. He lived for laughter. But no one laughed for him. Because the cruelest joke of all, the court never saw the man beneath the costume, only saw the punchline. And when it ended, no one stayed for the encore. Long before spotlights and scripts, theater was born in firelight and wine, in the ecstatic chants of a people reaching for the divine. It began not on a stage, but in the sacred groves of ancient Greece, where the god Dionysus reigned, god of wine, ecstasy, and transformation. In 6th century BCE Athens, during the wild spring festivals known as the Dionysia, citizens gathered not just to celebrate, but to become. Men danced in frenzied circles, voices rising in dithyramb hymns, so powerful they blurred the line between prayer and performance. Then, a single voice stepped forward. Thespis, legend says, became the first actor when he stepped from the chorus and spoke as a character. That moment when one man claimed to be another changed everything. Theater was born. From this sacred chaos, Greek drama evolved into a structured art of profound depth. Tragedy Tragödia, the goat song, became a mirror for the soul. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides wove tales of fate, hubris, and divine wrath. Oedipus, Antigone, Medea were not mere stories, but philosophical battlegrounds where mortals clashed with gods and destiny. Actors wore towering masks, their exaggerated features ensuring even the farthest spectator could feel the weight of sorrow or rage. Behind those masks, voices rang across open-air amphitheaters, like the theater of Dionysus, holding thousands who came not just to watch, but to witness. And then there was comedy. Where tragedy stared into the abyss, comedy mooned it. Aristophanes wielded satire like a sword, mocking war, politics, and even Socrates in plays like The Clouds. His characters were absurd men riding on giant dung beetles, women withholding sex to end war, but beneath the laughter lay sharp truth. Greek theater was not escape. It was civic duty, a shared ritual where art, religion, and democracy danced together under the Mediterranean sun. When Rome inherited the stage, it turned theater into spectacle. Grand amphitheaters echoed with music, trapdoors, and real executions. Roman comedy, led by Plautus and Terence, thrived on mistaken identities and clever slaves. But it was under emperors like Nero himself, a performer, that theater became propaganda. The stage was no longer a mirror, but a weapon of control, dazzling the masses to keep them quiet. Far from the marble ruins of Rome, another vision of theater flourished in India. The Natya Shastra, a sacred text from centuries BCE, declared drama a divine gift meant to educate, uplift, and stir the soul. Here, performance was rasa, emotional essence, love, fury, sorrow crafted through gesture, music, and mudras. Actors trained for years, not just to entertain, but to embody dharma. In China, theater unfolded like a painted scroll. From shamanic Nuo dances to the poetic Zayu dramas of the Yuan dynasty, it was a blend of ritual and artistry. The Tang Emperor even founded the Pear Garden, the world's first acting academy. By the 18th century, Peking Opera emerged stylized, symbolic, where every movement, every color, carried meaning. In Japan, no theater was a whisper in a world of noise. Slow, meditative, masked. A single actor, a flute, a drum, yet the stage became a threshold between life and death, past and present. Meanwhile, in the shadows, puppet theater spoke truths no human dared utter. In Java, Wayang Kulei cast flickering silhouettes of gods and heroes, guided by a Daling who was philosopher, priest, and comedian. In Japan, Bunraku brought wooden figures to life, their sorrow and rage voiced by a single chanter. These ancient stages did not vanish. They echo in every film, every play, every meme that tells a story. The Greeks gave us structure. The Romans, spectacle. India, emotion. China, symbolism. Japan, stillness. And the puppets. They live on in animation, in avatars, in the eternal human need to perform, to witness, and to remember. The forgotten warrior queens, Cynane and Adea-Eurydice. She was born not to silk and silence, but to the clash of swords and the thunder of hooves. Her name was Cynane, of Philip II of Macedon, sister to Alexander the Great, and a woman forged in the fire of war long before she ever wore a crown. While other princesses were taught to weave and whisper in courtly halls, Cynane learned to ride at full gallop, spear in hand, Mother Adea, warrior queen of Illyria, guiding her every strike. In the rugged hills of Macedon, where ambition was measured in bloodshed, Cynane grew not as a pawn, but as a blade. She didn't wait for power. She seized it. When Alexander marched east to conquer the known world, Cynane remained behind his shadow in the palace, watching empires tremble. She wasn't idle. She led armies. She fought in Illyria, not as a figurehead, but as a commander, her armor dented, her banner flying high, and she won. The people whispered, "She fights like a man," but they were wrong. She fought like a woman, fearless, precise, unyielding. In a world that denied women the right to rule, she carved her name into history with the edge of her sword. But her greatest battle was not fought on open fields. It was fought in the quiet corridors of power. Alexander died without a clear heir. The empire fractured. His generals as Dionysus began tearing the world apart, each clawing for control. And in that chaos, Cynane saw a chance. She had a daughter, Adea, young, sharp, and trained from childhood in the arts of war and statecraft. Cynane had raised her not to be a bride, but a queen, and now she would make it so. Her plan was bold. Marry Adea to Philip III Eurydice, Alexander's half-brother, a man of gentle mind but royal blood, the last legal link to the Argead dynasty. If Adea became his wife, and Cynane her advisor, together they could reclaim the throne not through conquest, but through lineage and legitimacy. It was a move that threatened everything. The regent's men like Perdiccas saw, not a marriage, but a rebellion. A woman with an army, a daughter with a crown, a mother with a strategy. They could not allow it. So when Cynane crossed into Asia Minor with Adea, she was intercepted, not in battle, but in betrayal. Perdiccas sent his brother Alcetus to stop her. And on a dusty road far from home, Cynane was assassinated by those who feared her more than any enemy general. But they underestimated her legacy. Her killers thought they had silenced a threat. Instead, they lit a fire. Adea reached the court, and though her mother was gone, her spirit lived on. She took a new name, Eurydice, name of ancient queens. She wore armor, not gowns. She stood beside Philip III, not as a consort, but as a ruler. She addressed the army, her voice clear and unafraid, winning the loyalty of veterans who remembered her mother's courage. She was no puppet. She was a queen in her own right, strategist, warrior, sovereign. She challenged Perdiccas. She defied the warlords. For a brief, brilliant moment, it seemed Macedon might be reborn under the rule of a woman who had earned her power. But the world was not ready. When Olympias, Alexander's ruthless mother, returned from exile, she saw Eurydice not as a queen but as a rival, the two women grandmother and granddaughter by blood. Enemies by ambition, faced off in the final act of a tragic dynasty. Eurydice marched to meet her, leading troops with the same fire that once burned in Cynane's eyes. But her army faltered. They could not fight the ghost of Alexander. Captured, imprisoned, and stripped of her crown, Eurydice was given a final choice: take her own life, or be executed like a criminal. She chose the sword. She died with her head high, her dignity intact. Just like her mother, their reigns were brief, their names erased from monuments, their stories buried beneath centuries of male conquest. But Cynane and Eurydice were more than victims. They were warriors, queens, visionaries. They proved that a woman could lead armies, command loyalty, and shape empires. For that they were destroyed, not because they failed, but because they succeeded in a world that could not bear it. Today their names echo like whispers in the wind. Forgotten, but not gone. Silenced, but not erased. For in the blood of Macedon, in the dust of its fallen thrones, one truth remains. Power has no gender, and sometimes the most dangerous weapon is a woman who knows it. The ancient origins of martial arts, long before dojos, rings, or belts, there was only the body breathing, moving, surviving. And from that primal rhythm, born in dust and desperation, rose something greater than war, something sacred, something eternal. This is not the story of sport. This is the story of martial arts not as combat, but as code, as prayer, as identity. It began where life was hardest. In the misty jungles of Kerala, India, over 3,000 years ago, a warrior teacher named Parashurama Hoffman, half-god, carved a clearing in the forest. He called it a Kalari, a sacred ground. Here he taught not just how to strike, but how to breathe, how to heal, how to become. This was Kalaripayattu, the world's oldest martial art. Boys trained before dawn, flowing through sequences that mimicked the lion's pounce, the cobra's strike, the peacock's grace. They learned to wield the Urami, a whip-like sword that demanded total control, for one slip meant death. But after training, they studied Ayurvedic medicine. The warrior who could break a bone must also know how to mend it, for in Kalaripayattu, violence was never the goal, balance was. Power without compassion was chaos. Strength without humility was weakness. Far to the east, in the mountains of China, another path unfolded. Not on battlefields, but in silence. In the Shaolin temple, a monk from India, Bodhidharma, watched his brothers weaken from years of meditation. So he gave them movement, taught them forms that drew energy from the earth, that channeled ki-like rivers through the body. From this, Kung Fu was born, not as a word for fighting, but as a way of mastery. The tiger struck with fury. The crane stood on one leg, still as a thought. The snake moved without warning. Each style was philosophy in motion. Later, in the Taoist monasteries, Tai Chi emerged, slow, flowing, a dance of yielding and redirection. Here, the greatest victory was not defeating an enemy, but mastering the self. To fight without anger, to win without pride. In China, the true battle was always within. In the sun-baked arenas of ancient Greece, the gods watched men test their limits. At Olympia, in 648 BCE, the most feared event was not the race, nor the javelin, it was Pankration. All powers. A brutal fusion of wrestling and striking where almost anything was allowed: kicks, punches, joint locks, chokes. Only two rules: no biting, no eye gouging. A fighter could break bones and still win. This was not mindless violence. Pankration demanded strategy, breath control, and unbreakable will. Soldiers trained in it, for when the spear broke and the sword fell, only the body remained. One champion, Arichin of Figalia, died in the ring, his neck locked in a final hold, but his opponent submitted. The dead man was crowned victor. Such was the price of glory. Pankration was not just sport, it was sacrifice. Along the Nile River, in the shadow of pyramids, warriors trained not for glory, but for cosmic order. In the tombs of Bani Hassan, over 400 wrestling scenes are carved in stone throws. Locks, sweeps, each movement precise, each stance a lesson in control. This was not play. It was preparation for war, for the defense of divine balance. Soldiers mastered tatib, a rhythmic staff-fighting dance with long wooden rods, once used by guards and pharaohs. Even in chariot warfare, archers shot with deadly precision at full gallop, combat fused with artistry. To fight in Egypt was not to conquer, but to preserve. The warrior was a guardian of the world. In the islands of Japan, the wind carried the sound of hooves and the creak of the yumi, the asymmetrical bow. The earliest warriors were horsemen bushi who fought for clan and honor. Over centuries, their skills hardened into Bushido, the way of the warrior. It's not a rule book, but a spirit. Loyalty, discipline, courage, and the readiness to die with dignity. Kenjutsu swordsmanship was not for show. It was a path. The blade was an extension of the soul. Later, Jujutsu taught how to defeat strength with technique, how to turn an enemy's force against them. In Japan, to fight was to walk a line between life and death, where every motion held meaning. Across the vastness of Africa, martial arts were not separate from life. They were life. Among the Hausa people, Dambe boxing turned festivals into battlegrounds. One hand wrapped like a spear, the other for defense, raw, powerful, sacred. In Senegal, lam wrestling was more than sport. Wrestlers danced to drums, wore charms from marabouts, and fought under spiritual protection. Victory required not just strength, but favor from the ancestors. In Zulu lands, boys trained with nguni, stick short, striking rods, learning reflexes, courage, and unity. Shaka Zulu himself transformed these techniques into military genius. From the horn to the cape, combat was ceremony, identity, survival. And in the Americas, long before empires fell, warriors walked in step with the earth. The Aztecs raised boys in Telpochcali, schools of war, where they trained with the Makua Wedala, wooden sword edged with obsidian, sharp enough to decapitate. To be an eagle or jaguar warrior was not just rankit, was spiritual transformation. Warfare was sacred, a duty to the gods. Farther south, the Inca drilled soldiers in mountain formations, using slings and clubs with terrifying precision. In the north, Lakota, Apache, and Comanche warriors honed stealth horsemanship. Ambush skills passed through dance, story, and ritual. The war dance was not performance. It was invocation, a prayer in motion. These were not just ways to fight. They were ways to live. Martial arts were never about violence. They were about discipline, about spirit, about remembering who you are when the world tries to break you. They survived conquest. They survived silence. They survived being buried. And today, when a student bows before a teacher, when a fist meets air in perfect form, when a body moves with purpose and grace, the ancient ones are there, whispering, watching, alive in every strike. For the first martial artists didn't just shape warriors, they shaped souls. The spiritual and cultural purpose of martial arts long before belts, tournaments, or cinematic legends, the first martial artist did not train to win. He trained to become, not stronger, not faster, but whole. In a quiet clearing in southern India, beneath the sway of palm trees and the scent of sandalwood, a young boy kneels at the edge of the Kalara, the sacred training ground. He touches the earth with his forehead, not in submission, in respect, for this is no ordinary floor of packed dirt and stone. It is a temple. And the movements he is about to learn are not mere techniques. They are prayers written in flesh and bone. This is Kalaripayattu, the oldest martial art known to humankind. And here every kick, every strike, every breath is a step on a path, not toward violence, but toward balance. The boy will spend years mastering flexibility before he ever lifts a weapon. He will learn to move like a cobra uncoiling, like a lion leaping, like a peacock dancing, because in this tradition, combat is not separation from nature, but harmony with it. And when he finally wields the Urimi, the deadly whip sword, it will not be to conquer, but to control his fear, his ego, his breath. For in Kalaripayattu, the true enemy is not the man across from you. It is the chaos within. Ekdun. And this truth echoes across continents, across centuries. In the mist-cloaked mountains of China, within the silent halls of the Shaolin temple, a monk moves like water. His hands trace arcs through the air slow, deliberate, like a heron stepping through reeds. This is not fighting. This is meditation in motion. Dharma once said, "The mind is the battlefield." And so the monks of Shaolin did not train to kill. They trained to still the storm of thought, to align body and breath with the rhythm of the universe. They studied the tiger's fury, the crane's grace, the snake's patience, not to mimic beasts, but to embody their essence. In Kung Fu, every form is a philosophy. To strike is to release energy. To yield is to gather strength. To fight without anger is the highest victory. And in the stillness of the Tai Chi master standing barefoot on soaked stone, the same lesson unfolds. His arms rise like fog. His weight shifts like the turning of the seasons. He does not battle. He flows. Because in Taoism, the softest thing in the world overcomes the hardest. The reed bends in the storm and survives. The oak stands tall and breaks. So too must the warrior learn. True power is not in domination, but in harmony. In ancient Egypt, warriors did not train merely to defend borders. They trained to uphold Matha, divine balance of truth, order, and justice. Their wrestling, their staff fighting Tatabe, their chariot drills, These were not just skills, they were rites. To fight was to serve the gods. To master the body was to purify the soul. The soldier was not a brute, he was a guardian of cosmic order. And in Africa, where the drumbeat is the heartbeat of the earth, martial arts were never separate from life. In Senegal, the wrestler of lamb dances before combat, adorned with charms chanting to ancestors. Victory is not just strength, it is spiritual favor. In Nigeria, the Dambe fighter wraps his fist like a spear, not just to strike, but to honor the warrior lineage of the House of People. In Zulu lands, boys train with sticks, not for war alone, but for initiation to manhood, into duty, into the unbroken chain of their people. Even in the Americas, where no manuals were written, the warrior danced. The Aztec youth trained in the Telpochcali, learning the Makua Weedle, not just as a weapon, but as a sacred tool of divine service. To be an eagle or jaguar warrior was to wear the spirit of the animal, to fight as an embodiment of the gods. In the plains of North America, the Lakota war dance was not performance, it was invocation, a prayer in motion, where every step prepared the body, mind, and soul for the trials ahead. These were not just ways to fight, they were ways to live, to remember, to belong. Because martial arts were never just about combat, they were about identity. And colonizers came when the British banned Kalaripayattu. When empires tried to erase native ways, the arts did not die. They went underground. They disguised themselves as dance. They hid in ritual. They survived in whispers, in footwork, in the silent bow before a teacher. When the world tried to strip a people of their history, their martial art became their memory. Today, when a student steps onto a mat and bows, when a hand slices through the air in perfect form, when a body moves with discipline and grace, the ancient ones are there, not as ghosts, but as guides. Because the true purpose of martial arts was never to destroy, it was to refine, to forge the self in fire and silence, to teach humility and victory, compassion and strength, stillness and motion. It was to remind us that the greatest battle is not fought with fists or swords, but in the quiet space between breaths, where ego falls away and the soul finally stands. The enduring legacy of ancient performance and combat long after the last mask is stored, the final bell of the Jester silenced, and the swords laid to rest, something remains. Not dust, not memory, but motion, a flicker in the dark, a footstep on a stage, a breath before a strike. This is not the end of a story, it is its continuation. Because what we call ancient was never truly lost. It was transformed. Look around. When an actor steps into the light and becomes someone else, he is not inventing a craft. He is channeling the spirit of Thespis, who first stepped from the chorus and dared to speak as a man, not a mob. When a playwright twists satire into truth, they echo Aristophanes, who mocked gods and generals with a laugh that shook Athens. When a dancer in Kerala raises her arms like a cobra uncoiling, she is not performing, she is praying. Just as the masters of Kalaripayattu did 3,000 years ago, where every kick was a hymn, every stance a scripture, the stage is not just wood and lights, it is a sacred circle, drawn in fire, blood, and wine. And the arena? It is not just rules and ropes. It is a battlefield of will, where the body speaks what words cannot. In a modern octagon, a fighter stands calm before the storm. He breathes deep, centers himself, and bows. That bow is not ceremony, it is legacy. He does not know it, but his spine straightens like a Shaolin monk, who once meditated in mountain silence, training not to destroy, but to master. His strikes flow like the tiger, his footwork glides like the crane styles born not in gyms but in temples, where kung fu was never just fighting, but philosophy in motion. When he absorbs a blow and turns it into a counter, he echoes the Taoist principle of Wu, wielding to overcome. He fights like a warrior of old, even if he wears shorts and gloves instead of silk and steel. This is not coincidence. It is inheritance. Because the ancient world did not die, it evolved. The jester who danced for kings under the threat of the dungeon, he lives in the stand-up comic who dissects power with a mic, risking backlash for a truth wrapped in laughter. The warrior queens Cynane and Adea-Eurydice, who wore armor and defied empires. They echo in every woman who claims space, voice, and rule in a world that still fears her strength. The masked tragedies of Sophocles, where fate and fire consumed heroes. They live in films where broken men face their demons on rain-slicked streets, not with swords, but with silence. Theater and combat were never opposites. They were siblings born from the same need: to be seen, to be known, to matter. In ancient Greece, men fought in Pankration with bare hands. No rules but honor. Today in MMA, fighters do the same referees instead of gods, but the same primal test. Who endures, who transcends. In Egypt, warriors trained in Tadib, not just to fight, but to uphold cosmic balance. Now, a boxer in Accra trains at dawn not for glory, but for dignity, for his family, for his name. Same purpose. A different century. In Java, the Dowling pulls shadows across a screen, telling epics of gods and kings through wayang kulit. Today, an animator in Jakarta does the same with pixels and code. The medium changes, the magic does not. The samurai who followed Bushido, who believed a warrior must be ready to die with honor. He lives in the athlete who loses a match but bows anyway, in the soldier who carries his comrade, in the artist who creates, even when no one pays. These are not relics. They are rituals, passed hand to hand, breath to breath, generation to generation. Because what is a TikTok skit if not a modern dithyramb, wild, chaotic, divine? What is a protest chant if not a chorus from a Greek tragedy, demanding justice from the powerful? What is a dance battle in the Bronx if not Lam wrestling translated through rhythm and pride? We still need the jester. We still need the warrior. We still need the actor who makes us weep for a stranger. Why? Because performance and combat are not about entertainment or violence. They are about identity, about resistance, about the soul refusing to be erased. When a child in India practices Kalaripayattu, she is not just learning kicks. She is reclaiming a lineage that colonizers tried to bury. When a playwright in Lagos writes a satire about corruption, he is not just writing, he is becoming the fool who speaks truth to power knowing the cost. The ancient world did not vanish. It adapted. It went underground. It disguised itself as dance, as sport, as meme, as music. And now it rises again. In every film that makes us cry, in every fight that makes us believe in resilience, in every joke that cuts deeper than a blade, we are still the audience. We are still the performers. We are still the warriors. The masks have changed. The stages have grown. But the fire in the chest, the need to express, to witness, to survive, that has not changed in 10,000 years. So when you watch a play, or step into a dojo, or laugh at a comedian who tells the truth too well, listen closely. Because beneath the surface, beyond the lights and the noise, there is a whisper. It is the voice of the past. It's the echo of those who came before. And it says only this: we were here. We fought. We danced. We spoke. And you carry us now. We began tonight with a man in a Jester's hat laughing so others wouldn't see him cry. We walked through sacred amphitheaters where gods were born from song. We stood beside warrior queens who wore armor like a second skin. We felt the breath of monks in Shaolin, the silence before a strike, the rhythm of a staff dancing under the Egyptian sun. And through it all, one truth echoes louder than any drum, any line, any battle cry. We have always needed to perform. We have always needed to fight, not just to survive, but to remember who we are. These stories of jesters and queens, of masked tragedies and silent warriors aren't relics. They're roots, deep in the soil of who we've always been. Every film, every fight, every stand-up routine, every protest chant, they carry the pulse of something older than empires, older than writing, older than memory. So the next time you laugh at a joke that cuts too deep, or feel chills during a powerful scene, or watch a fighter bow before the bell rings, pause, listen. Because somewhere in that moment, a 3,000-year-old voice is whispering back, I was here too. Thank you so much for watching. If this journey meant something to you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this with someone who believes that history isn't just about kings and dates, but about the souls who dared to speak, to fight, to dance in the dark. And to everyone who commented from Tokyo to Toronto, Lagos to Lisbon, thank you. Your voices are part of this story now. Until next time, keep listening to the echoes. They're still speaking. Music fades, screen darkens, text appears. The past is never silent.